Yeah, because Ecuador is not used to that, right? Ecuador traditionally has been a very safe country that has not had gangs or cartels or things like that to any large degree. Ecuador was the second safest country in Latin America, and its murder rate, I think, was 4 for every 100,000 or something like that. It's gone up now to like 40 or something. Mm-hmm. So that's a big difference, right? Like that's a really big difference. So we have seen this criminal element come in the last few years that we didn't have prior to that. I mean, this is our community, this is a home for us, right? When I go to those people and I have these conversations, I don't have the fear that a lot of other people do, right? I don't have that fear. So, there's a lot of comments on our channel, there's other people's channels who will tell you, the world's coming to an end and we're all gonna die and run for the hills.
What I'm being told is like some of the higher ups in the gangs, they go to these kids, they're like, hey, clearly they don't have opportunities. They're like, we'll give you a cell phone, we'll give you a gun, we'll give you a motorcycle if you work for us. So all of a sudden they're like, whoa, like I have opportunities. They're giving me this stuff that they don't have access to, and they get probably surrounded by bad people. They get into drugs and stuff, and they end up doing bad things. But
our podcast is that we tell the truth, what we really think, and people can disagree with what we think, but I think the proof is in the pudding. Like we didn't leave Ecuador. All of us weren't born in Ecuador and like, oh, we're too scared to leave. How bad it gets, it doesn't matter. We're hunkering down. No, like we already left somewhere else and came here. I'm not scared to do that again.
And it's not only us. I mean, at the end of the day, just in our region, there's about 2,000 expats that choose to live here that are not going anywhere, right? That being said, some people are moving. Some people are, like you said, are more afraid.
I just want an honest perspective from someone who lives here. Our only goal on the channel is to show on the ground what life is like here, who's living here, what kind of people are here, what their story is. Whatever their opinion is, and some people have some opinions I don't agree with at all. That's okay. Hello, and welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. Jesse, Brandon, Carl. Brandon is still on the pod despite a commenter trying to kick him off. But high five, you're still here. It's good to see you. By the way, commenter, I think they didn't like your political views, which of course was in a short, which were not your political views. They were you talking about someone else talking about something, but in the short, there's no context. So anyhow, easy to piss people off on the internet. We love you all. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy this content, please put a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. And I want to address something right off the bat. Obviously, we're going to talk today a lot about the current situation in Ecuador. That's on top of everybody's mind. We did an emergency broadcast last Wednesday, so today we're recording on Wednesday, January 17th, so that was literally exactly 1 week ago. We did an emergency broadcast kind of updating, 24 hours in what was happening in Ecuador. I just interviewed an analyst, consultant, commentator, all of those things, out of Quito yesterday. That'll be getting released in the next couple of days, so that's really, truly an insider's perspective on, what's happened to date, what's the future may or may not hold, how, what are the opinions of, kind of the people in the know in terms of everything that's going on, likelihood of positive outcomes, negative outcomes. So tune into that. That was a fun interview. It's about 45 minutes. We get into, not super in-depth, but like some decent depth on some things. Talk about that.
And he's local. He's from Quito?
He's Ecuadorian. Yep. He grew up in Guayaquil and lives in Quito. I believe he grew up in Guayaquil. He at least spent a bunch of time in Guayaquil. It's possible he's from Quito, but Guayaquil, Quito basically is where he's been based his whole life. He actually has a couple of YouTube channels that have about 30,000-40,000 subscribers, and then he does some political consulting and different stuff like that. So yeah, interesting guy. Came to me through an attorney friend of mine in Guayaquil who I reached out to interview, and he's like, I got someone better for you. Talk to this guy. He's a political analyst, da-da-da. So that'll be coming out. I'm also going to be interviewing another guy on the channel to give his thoughts on the current situation. So you'll get all the current situation stuff you need, and then other channels are following this play-by-play, right? So you've got people giving daily updates even to kind of what's going on. And so
but just real quick, I followed some of those, and some of those those updates, which I think they're good intentions. Some of those I found like they're reporting on stuff, and then the day later we're finding out, okay, that wasn't true or that didn't happen. There's been some misinformation that we're seeing as stuff spreads online in social media. So not every, it's hard, guys. Like you're on social media, you're watching this channel, you see how information spreads and rumors spread and things that aren't true, and it's hard to decipher. So when you're getting those real-time reports just because it's coming out through social media, you gotta, I don't know, you have to vet it in a way. I don't know how you do that necessarily, but I just know for a fact that there's been situations recently with this one where we've seen things that were reported, and then a day later we find out, okay, that actually didn't even happen.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I just, there's some context that I want to give, and you guys, of course, can give your thoughts if you want to, but, there's been some criticism of us over the years for sort of, the accusations of kind of downplaying stuff, like negative stuff, right? And here's the thing about that, right? And I've made comments like this in the past. I've made this point. I've kind of even explained it in some depth. But I feel very strongly about this, right? So number one, the rumor mill amongst foreigners in Ecuador is wild. It's like high school. It's like high school, maybe worse. It's wild. The rumors I've heard about myself over my 10 and a half years here are mind-blowing. The rumors that I've heard of, people just, in Vilcabamba specifically, it's a small town. There's some interesting folks here. It's a very diverse, very, very unique community.
Sure.
I love it. I know the three of us love it. But it has its quirks, right? And I think one of them in particular is the rumor mill. It's wild, right? So you have that. Then you also have a phenomenon that I think is also very powerful, which is that you have a lot of people living here who don't understand the culture, don't speak the language, and everything's a little bit different from what they're used to, but they think that their opinion is valid and they think they know. So you have just a lot of BS, right? You just have a lot of stuff where they're not in a position to know what took place or didn't, but they tell you as if they are, right? Now, I'm not hating on any of these people. Have fun, do your thing. We may have differences of opinions on stuff. Awesome, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I noticed. So right when I got here, I was kind of in that camp. Right? So I came here in 2013 with no Spanish. I came here in 2013 from New York City with my American mentality, my U.S. mentality, with no Spanish. And I went through kind of that cycle where you have no idea what's actually taking place, but you're hearing all this stuff. I remember in Vilcabamba, the stuff I was hearing in 2013, 14, as I was learning the language and making friends who are Ecuadorian friends. I panicked half a dozen times, maybe a dozen times over things I heard. Oh, the government's going to do this. The government's going to do that. They just passed this law, this. Oh, now this thing, you got to, and I'm going, oh my God, what did I do? I'm panicking, yeah. And then, over the 2 or 3 years, once I was 2 or 3 years in, I'm living in Loja at the time. All my friends are Ecuadorian. I've learned the language now. And now I'm ingrained enough into the society and the culture where I can ask Ecuadorians what the truth is, right? So I started doing that. So I'd come to Vilcabamba to play basketball, and because I was living in Loja at the time, I'd come to Vilcabamba to play basketball, and I'd hear, the latest, scary thing that's taking place, and then I'd go back to Loja, or I'd text or call a friend, and I'd say, hey, have you heard that? And then they would give me the real story, which has nothing almost ever to do with the sort of gringo rumor mill story, which tends to be very fear-based. And I learned that, and then once I learned that, I was like, oh, okay, you pay no attention at all to what the foreigners are talking about in Vilcabamba. A lot of it is just kind of folks with too much time on their hands.
Well, that's a good point, though, right? I've noticed all those things you said, but also there's a lot of people that have a lot of time on their hands. Yeah. A lot of time. So when you have a lot of time and you're bored and you have nothing to do, it seems like that stuff gets exacerbated. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's like a big thing that I see exacerbates a lot of these rumors.
Yeah. So, so then I went through that process, right? And then over time, you make I'm a big fan of track record. Yeah. That's for me how I sort of grade, for lack of a better word, my reality or sort of the information I get. I pay attention. When someone tells me something, as it plays out, was it correct or not? And the folks that have a great track record, I start to give a lot more weight to their opinion, and the folks that don't, I stop listening, right? So that's kind of how I decipher my world and my reality. I pay a lot of attention to track record. So what I realized very quickly, again, the people in Vilcabamba who don't speak Spanish and don't have Ecuadorian friends and are simply sitting around talking to one another and piling on and like doing that kind of thing, they're incorrect all the time, always. And then the folks that live
almost all the time.
And then the folks that are from here, who have lived here their whole life, who understand the way things work in their country, and who have the connections and the social network to be able to find out when they have a question, I've identified a number of them who over and over and over again have been correct. And so I go to those people for my information. Now, as a result of that, and I'm just speaking for myself here, as a result of that, I've come to notice a pattern, and I've, right? So yes, I ignore, foreigners' opinions as a foreigner, which is hilarious. So ignore my opinion, no problem, right? That's why we bring on the folks.
Irony.
That's why we bring on the folks that are from here, right?
Exactly.
I ignore the foreigner's opinion. I ask the people who know what's going on. As a result of that, you're not going to hear from me, oh my God, I'm so scared of this and this and this and this and this and this. Why? Because I'm not. Mm-hmm. Because those things, now we get specific to talk about what we're talking about, but in general, those things are not happening, at least in the way that people are thinking they are or are afraid of them. So I just wanted to say that because I think right now in the world in general, we're in wild times, like wild times. We've got aliens in Miami, whether any of that happened or not, but like those kinds of stories are a thing now, right? We've got presidential candidates getting taken off ballots. We've got wars in the Middle East. We've got wars in Europe. We've got dissension across the board. We've got people fighting about everything. We've got weird weather events. We've got I'm just scratching the surface, right? We've got economic stuff. It is a very, very wild time in the world. There's a lot of chaos. We've seen kind of worldwide upticks in crime, starting with COVID, like since during COVID time and since. We've got, the new generation, like the young people now, they just sit around and make content. That's their livelihood, right? They don't want to. They don't want to work. They don't want to. It's a totally new paradigm. Systems are breaking down. People are questioning whether education even makes sense anymore or not, right? I've been on that train for 20 years, but for other folks, right? Does college make economic sense or not is a real question now. Mm-hmm. Whereas back in the day that was unheard of to even that would have been blasphemy, right? So of course I'm talking a little bit hyperbolically on some of this to make my point, but we're in really, really, really wild times. And so here we are in Latin America, in this country, this country that people have heard of now, but they hadn't when I got here. This kind of not on the map country. And for folks who are looking at it from afar, or even folks who live here, it's very different than what they're used to. The parameters are different, and it's an unknown. So it's very easy when there's an unknown, it's easy for there to be fear, right? Kind of in general. So I personally don't view my role on this podcast to fan those flames, right? I don't view my role on this podcast to take every rumor and every kind of, event or any kind of thing and make it into this scary, this big scary thing that and lie to you and say, hey, I'm really afraid. I'm afraid for this, I'm afraid for that. This could happen, that could happen. Of course stuff could happen. Everybody's worried. People ask us, what about China? What about the World Economic Forum? Do they have power in Ecuador? What about this? Of course, these are all great conversations, right? And we can give our opinions all day about any of this stuff. is it any different than any other country with any of those things? No, they're great conversations in any country that you're in.
Right.
You know, how much influence does this group of people have or that group of people have? You know, how does this play out? How does that play out? I was interviewing this guy the other day, the political commentator. He gave a great stat, which you guys can listen to. He said, when I got here, Ecuador was I always heard third. He said second. Ecuador was the second safest country in Latin America, and its murder rate, I think, was 4 for every 100,000 or something like that. It's gone up now to like 40 or something. Mm-hmm. So that's a big difference, right? Like that's a really big difference. So we have seen this criminal element come in the last few years that we didn't have prior to that. And me and him had a great conversation about that. We all know that. It's all in the news. We talk about it on this channel all the time. Those things exist, and where we live and in where we are, and the way as I go to my people, right, who I trust for information and who have a great track record and have always nailed it when I ask them questions, when I try to get a handle on what's taking place, because I care. I got 3 kids. You know, I got a wife and 3 kids here. You all have wives and children here. You know, we all care about our safety and about where we live, right? I mean, this is our community. This is our home for us, right? When I go to those people and I have these conversations, I don't have the fear that a lot of other people do, right? I don't have that fear. So, you know, there's a lot of comments on our channel. There's other people's channels who will tell you, you know, the world's coming to an end and we're all going to die and run for the hills. Right. And I don't feel that way at all, right? That is not my perception. It's not how I understand this situation. So for anybody out there feeling like, you know, we should be more negative, or we should be more fearful, or we should sort of, you know, something along those lines, I can't do, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, I can't do anything other than tell you my opinion. I'm one guy. I've been here since July of 2013, opened businesses, done a bunch of investing, and made a bunch of friends, and married a girl, and have lived here since then, and that's who I am. You respect my opinion, don't respect my opinion, it's just my opinion, but I can't give false ones. Yeah. You know, I can't sit here and tell you, oh my God, the sky's falling, when I don't feel that way. Right. So I just wanted to
that's great, man. I'm glad you shared that, because that's important for people to hear. That's important, like, because I feel the same way. Like, you know, we get, well, you have a real estate company. Of course you're downplaying everything. We hear stuff like that a lot, and it's like you nailed it. We have our families here. If I felt scared, if I felt threatened, if I was really concerned about some of the stuff that we're hearing, that you hear about, that rumors, any of this stuff, I would move my family. I moved my family from the United States to here. You think I'm scared to move from here? Like, if it was bad, I would move. Like, I'm telling you what I really think, because that's what I really think. Like, hopefully that comes through, because that's like I feel like that's the foundation of our podcast, is that we tell the truth, what we really think, and people can disagree with what we think, but I think the proof is in the pudding. Like, we didn't leave Ecuador. All of us weren't born in Ecuador and like, oh, we're too scared to leave. How bad it gets, it doesn't matter. We're hunkering down. No, like, we already left somewhere else and came here. I'm not scared to do that again if I have to do that again, if I feel like I need to do that again, because that's best for my family. I'm not, and if that's the case, you won't see me on this podcast, right? I mean, that's it, right? So for me, I align with, you know, how you spoke about that. Like, I feel like when I talk to the camera, to the phone, to whatever, like, I'm saying what I believe and what I think. I know you are too, Carl. So hopefully that comes across to everybody.
Yeah, and it's not only us. I mean, at the end of the day, just in our region, there's about 2,000 expats that choose to live here that are not going anywhere, right? That being said, some people are moving. Some people are, like you said, are more afraid. They decide to move. Sure. You know, and we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the future holds. Right. The situation could get, you know, bad enough that we decide to move. But currently, it's really not like that. Like, you know, we enjoy living here. We feel overall very safe here, at least my family and I. You know, things do happen, but we take measures and precautions to make sure we're safe.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear. safety here has gotten worse over the last few years. There's no question about that, right? We've talked about that probably 30 times on the channel. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that. It's a little different now than it was 4 years ago.
True.
But when I go to my people and talk, I'm extremely optimistic, and we're going to get into this stuff. We're going to get into, in a minute, we're going to get into the on-the-ground update of what's taking place here. But I'm very, very optimistic about how this will play out. Mm-hmm. I actually kind of think it's a good thing because it's mobilized this counter force. Yeah, because Ecuador is not used to that, right? Ecuador traditionally has been a very safe country that has not had gangs or cartels or things like that to any large degree, and that's changed over the last few years, and people are hardcore pushing back against that. And so we'll talk about that in a minute, but I just want to give one more quick anecdote. There was a time where I considered leaving. So when I got here, 2013, I came wanting lots and lots and lots of freedom, right? I had read online bad information that apparently had been true previously but was no longer, that Ecuador was kind of this sort of libertarian paradise where you could basically just do whatever you want. As I realized years later, it kind of is, but at first glance it doesn't look that way because there is rules and bureaucracy and there's all kinds of stuff like that. So when I first got here, that was my first surprise. Was like, oh no, you can't do whatever you want. There's all kinds of rules and stuff. That was a little bit disappointing. And then as I lived here for a while and I realized that the president at that time, who I'm not saying good or bad about, I'm just giving you my thoughts at that time, because I think actually Rafael Correa did a lot of good things. I don't personally align with him ideologically, but I do think he did a lot of good things for the country, so everyone can have their opinions on that, that's fine. But when I got here, Correa, in 2014, so like a year in, a little bit less, Correa starts making announcements that made me think we're headed towards a Venezuela situation. That we're talking about the basically government control of everything. That scared me. In 2016, we're heading into an election, and I'm feeling like, well, if Correa's party wins this election, he's had 10 years of rule at this point. If Correa's party here wins this election, I think we're going to be Venezuela, and I've got to start selling property and thinking about another place to live, maybe a place that's a little bit freer economically and politically and those kinds of things. So what did I do? I called the people I trust, that know, right? And it was wild because what they all told me the same thing, which is always the case. They all told me the same thing. They said, don't worry. It doesn't matter who wins this election. They're going to get rid of the stuff you're most worried about, that we're all most worried about. And at the time I thought, these guys are wrong. They don't know. I'm right, These guys don't know. So it turns out Moreno got elected, who was from Correa's party. So I'm panicking. This is 2016. I'm panicking. And my friends are still telling me, no, we're good. Like, it's fine. He's going to get rid of this stuff. Life's going to go back to normal, da-da-da. I'm thinking, man, these guys just don't get it.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened, right? Exactly what they said was going to happen happened. So there was the craziest law that Correa had put forth. Moreno got off the books, and it was back to business as usual for those 4 years that Moreno was in power before Lasso took over. And so again, right? Right now, if I was talking to my friends and they were telling me, nah, we're screwed here, I'd be telling you guys, and I'd be considering other options.
Right.
That's not what they're telling me. It is what it is.
Yeah, I remember at that time in 2016, during the elections, I knew at least a couple Ecuadorians that actually did leave. That they were very worried about the same thing, and clearly they were wrong. When Moreno basically went against Correa,
in many ways,
turned against him, and they were going to put what was being voted on was like inheritance taxes that were like 50% or something.
70. Wow. Yeah, or 70 or 75. Wow. Yeah.
That was pretty insane. There were people on the street protesting.
Oh, they had huge nationwide protests over that. Yeah.
Well, one last thing I think viewers of our podcast should keep in mind is that, we give some slightly broader perspective, but predominantly the opinion we have is of this region. Yeah. We're not opining on every place in Ecuador and every place in this entire country. Like, we're giving opinion. We have firsthand firsthand insight here in the Vilcabamba, Loja region. And then for things outside of that, we're tapping people within our network, like the folks you've interviewed recently that are out of our sphere, that are, we don't live in Quito, we don't live in Guayaquil, we don't live in Manta, we don't have, So yeah, we can see, we hear some of that stuff, we can share some insight, but really the experts we bring on, those are the opinions that I would trust, But for us, we're kind of, if you hear something that we're saying, 99% of the time it's in reference to this region, the Loja Vilcabamba region.
And even, just to add on to that for a second, like, I've done a lot of interviews over the years on the channel with expats and also with some locals as well. Very often they'll say, while we're setting up the interview, they'll be like, is there anything you don't want me to say? Or is there any subject you don't want me to talk about? My answer is every single time I say, no, there's nothing off limits at all. I just want an honest perspective from someone who lives here. Our only goal on the channel is to show on the ground what life is like here, who's living here, what kind of people are here, what their story is. Whatever their opinion is, and some people have some opinions I don't agree with at all. That's okay. That's completely fine. I mean, even the political commentator, said a couple of things in that. I was like, okay, that's not my view.
Right.
That's all right. I'm not going to censor it. I'm not going to I'm not going to do anything differently. I'm just going to let him share his thoughts. We're all adults here. People can decipher, between what they believe and what they don't. And if you want to, and if that leads you to disagreeing with me, great. No problem at all. Yeah. So anyways, let's jump in. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, let's invite him on the show.
Right, exactly. Let's debate it on the channel.
Yeah, I just wanted to, because I think it's kind of funny and it's a good example, but about the rumor mill throughout the years, I have a couple anecdotes that I think are quite funny. I don't know if you remember when they put in the cell phone tower in Vilcabamba.
I do.
All of a sudden we get these emails and everyone's freaking out. 5G, there's 5G in Vilcabamba. There was like literally a group of people thinking about like going and bombing the thing at night and stuff. Like, literally.
Oh, really?
No. So I can second this. It was wild.
Oh boy! Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like 5-6 years ago, and there's still no 5G here. Like, there was not 5G at all. It was just a big drone, like a drum cell phone tower that they put in there. Another thing recently, maybe a year ago, as they were doing this development thing on the side of the road, maybe as the gas station was being built, people were like, "Oh, did you hear they're building a super maxi?
Oh, I heard that one. Yeah.
Super maxi, like a Safeway, or what was it, like a Costco,
yeah,
like a Walmart.
Yeah. People were telling me, "Oh, we got a campaign against that. It's going to put all the tiendas out of business. All the local people."
Right.
It never existed.
No, it never existed.
And it couldn't. Super maxi is literally only in large cities. It's too big for a small town. I mean, they don't even have a super maxi in large towns anywhere in the country. No.
Yeah, so those are good examples. Those were all foreigners that were spraying these things. And there's a million other ones that we could go on, but it's a good example of the rumor mill. Someone has an idea, they share it with someone else, and then it just goes around, and a lot of times it's not accurate.
It's almost like, you remember the game Telephone as a kid?
Yeah.
It's like telephone
like
for
that.
grown-ups.
Right.
It's like social media telephone for grown-ups somehow. And
I mean,
by the end of it, it's Jesse's got 3 ears and one nose, or 3 ears and 2 noses, and at the beginning of it was, Jesse's the sexiest human man I've ever seen in my life. But
I mean, only you would say that. So.
And Nick Lachey.
No, I mean, and again, right, a lot of times too, everyone has different experiences. That's the other thing too, right? It's like no one can get inside someone else's eyes or shoes or whatever and have their experience, which is going to shape your perspective and your opinion. So like, we can only share from our experiences. I had a guy tell me the other day, now I'm not telling you he's right or I'm right. I have my thoughts, he has his. That's fine. We have a difference of opinion. I had a guy tell me the other day that he was giving advice to someone saying, oh, there's no reason to sue anyone here because as a foreigner, you're not going to get a fair shake no matter what. Now, to me, this is absurd, right? This is patently false. This is completely absurd. I've been involved in court cases. I've helped clients solve their own issues that they've had, where they just needed help, and I recommended a good lawyer, and I've tracked those outcomes. I think the rule of law here in general is fantastic. I think it's better than the U.S. in many ways. Certainly much cheaper, much faster. You don't, much less games being played, all kinds of reasons. So in general, I think that stuff is fantastic, and it would never even occur to me to think that they treat foreigners any differently. If anything, I think we get treated a little better in many circumstances. But I don't know what his experiences are, who is telling me this.
Sure.
He's drawn that conclusion from his perspective, and it is what it is. It's not mine. That's, okay. Like,
Yeah.
Right on.
No, yeah, it's true. And there's something to be said about, hiring the right attorney that's going to actually work for you, right? Because, there's corruption here. Like, there is. It just is. There's everywhere, right? But here, it's a little more obvious. I mean, you hear stuff, right? But the justice system, like you said, I think overall is good. But yeah, I think definitely keep in mind that, there can be some corruption.
No question.
The coast, at least people from the coast tell me, there's no corruption here on the Sierra.
Right.
Just go to the coast and you'll see,
And I've experienced that too, right? So the culture on the coast is totally different.
Yeah.
It's much looser. The rule of law is less, right? So you have to be more careful about your affairs there because it's easier to bribe people. There's a little more corruption. There's corruption everywhere. There's some degree of corruption everywhere. It is Latin America, so Latin America is kind of famous for that kind of stuff, and that does go on here. But the culture in La Sierra, in the mountains, isn't that at all. Doesn't mean none of it ever exists, but it isn't that. And so, especially Loja, in this region, you have a culture that, is about as kind of buttoned up and straight and sort of like honorable as you're gonna find anywhere.
It's like proper.
It's very
It's
proper.
it's even reflected in the language. And you go to Loja and people I meet there, they don't speak in slang. There's no. It's proper. Hello, good day, how are you? It's like proper greeting and formal greeting and formal, goodbye at the end of every conversation. It's not just, so it's reflected everywhere throughout at least in the 2.5 years I've been here. It's reflected everywhere in Loja. You can see it's pervasive through the culture, the language, the way they dress, how they speak to you, all those relationships.
I mean that for me, like that's what I love about it here. Right. It's like that stuff for me. It's like it's very heartwarming.
Right.
It's like people are people. They care. They care about you. They care about themselves. They care about their family. They care about where they live. They care about their reputation. They care about the perception people have of them in their area and their families and all those kinds of things. Where else in the world, and I'm sure there are places, I don't know them, but I haven't traveled that much. But where else in the world do you not have a culture of juvenile delinquency?
Right.
We don't have that here.
No, it's true.
There's in this region. I'm not talking about Guayaquil, guys. I'm not talking about Guayaquil. I don't know what goes on in Guayaquil in that way. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff going on in Guayaquil and perhaps Quito and maybe Manta. I don't know. I'm talking about here. In this region, you do not have groups of kids smoking weed, graffitiing, stealing stuff, trying to prove themselves in all these kinds of ways. You just don't have any of that.
It's not daily culture here.
At all. At all. You have, kids here are like, they're like, good morning. And they shake your hand and they're really polite and nice and they'll help you and like, they're wonderful. Like, they're well raised. They're
It's amazing how they greet you as well here, right?
Yeah.
Like you go to a setting, there's multiple people, and everyone will come and either shake your hand or give you a kiss on the cheek, and they'll go around the room.
Yeah.
Make sure they greeted every single person. Like it's very formal.
Yeah, it's very proper and formal.
Yeah.
It's beautiful because like we've lost all those traditions back home.
There's some of that. I would make the argument that you could find some of that in some of the south of the United States still, like in some of those Southern Belle states where they still have that proper South greetings. It's like the Ecuador version of that. It's in a way where it's obviously different words, different types of greetings, but still like the more formal. Still they have, and it's probably more reflective in the more rural, smaller towns in the South where it still has some of that. Like, good morning, how you doing? Sir, ma'am, peaches and cream.
And by the way, for those who don't know, because some people find that a little awkward, I think in France is like 3 kisses. Or like sometimes you kiss on both cheeks or whatever. Here's one.
Right.
One on one cheek. Usually
and it's
the man,
the outside, right?
Yeah.
It's to the...
I go left. I always go left.
Yeah, I go to the left, right?
Yeah.
It's to the woman's right cheek. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what they expect.
Right. And I always used to go, when I would hug in the States, I would go to the left. I would go to the right because I would go like heart to heart with somebody. You know, like that's how. Yeah.
I definitely had a bump or two here.
I've done.
Well, it's something you got to get used to too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not used to giving women a peck on the cheek back home when we meet them.
Right.
But here, that's very normal.
expected, yeah.
And then you go home and start doing it, and it's very awkward.
Right.
But
like the first time you meet somebody, not like somebody you know. Like it's your introduction to that person, and you kiss them on the cheek. Yeah. Wow.
it's actually really lovely.
No, it's great.
Like the whole greeting process here.
It's human. It makes you feel alive. It makes you feel human. Like, wow, this is like a human interaction.
I mean, I've told this story before, but like, you know, coming from New York City, I grew up in Vermont. I lived in New York City for about 15 years before I moved here. Coming from New York City, where it's go, go, go all the time, and the number one rule, basically there's only one rule, let's say 2 rules, don't disrespect anyone and don't waste anyone's time. That's basically New York in a nutshell, right? And coming here from there and sitting in business meetings where there's 30 minutes or more, it could be less, but could be more, of small talk before you talk about the subject at hand. I mean, this was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But what I realized after a while, it's actually a very important part of doing business here, not just because it lets you reach your goals, it's actually the way people build trust with one another and decide whether that's the person they're going to do business with or not.
Right.
So it's all about forming bonds because people here only do business with people they trust personally, right? And so that's why the first few years here can be a little bit frustrating if you're in business. They were for me because no one knew me, and I don't have the social network and those personal connections, and that's the only way you can do anything here. So that 30 minutes of small talk, not only is it kind of beautiful because it's personal, you get to know them and you talk about your kids and your family and they're this and they're that, so it's nice that way as well. And it also speaks to the totally different relationship people have with time here, where it's like time is not really considered a commodity here. But it's also an important part of the trust building process and the sort of the process of deciding, you know, does this door open up or not?
Right. It's almost insulting to call it small. Like we would call it small talk from the States because that's what it would. Be like, it's almost like degrading in a way. Like we're just like, let's get through the small talk to get to the stuff that matters. Right. But here, the small talk, as you described, it actually matters. It's part of the culture. It's not small. It's actually, you know, it's called something different.
Yeah.
It's called big talk, you know, or I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I guess there's another expression, beating around the bush. It's more common here to beat around the bush.
Oh, yeah.
You know, to take a while until you get to the point. You know, even you have someone that has a property for sale, and you talk, you do the small talk, and then you get there, and you know, they almost avoid giving you the price until like the last sentence of or even something like, well, why don't you come see it first? You know?
Yeah, 100%.
You know, like it's almost like they're uncomfortable with like that.
Directness.
With the directness.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a much less direct culture. It's all innuendo. Everything's implied. Almost nothing said directly. All right. Well, after the longest preface on the history of the planet,
see you tomorrow, guys. We're gonna do part 2.
you know, let's jump into it. So you know, with all that being said, right? Ecuador is absolutely experiencing you know, a very unique situation, right? Where we have, and I'm not gonna give all the history, and then Carl's gonna give an update on the last 6 or 7 days and kind of what's taken place up until now. So I'll try to do like the 30-second version up until then. But basically, we've had Cartels / Brandon knows that I can be long-winded.
The 30-second version is like 15 minutes.
All right, put a timer, bro. Put a timer, but give me 60 seconds. So basically, we had this event on Tuesday of last week of, 10th, so that would have been the 9th of, January 9th. We had some gang members took over a radio, television station. We had sort of countrywide attacks, organized attacks from gangs in response to the president ordering a 60-day sort of state of emergency to go after the gangs after this gang leader had escaped. You guys have probably heard all this stuff a lot, so I don't want to get into all those details because you've heard it, we've already talked about it. Since then, we've had now we've had 8 days now since then where there's been these ongoing operations mostly by the military. So, which is interesting, and the guy hit this on the channel. The police are used to dealing with the public, so they're also sometimes used to taking bribes, whereas the military is not. So that's why Noboa went military leading this, because they don't have necessarily those same, they may not be compromised in that same way. Right. So we have the military leading this operation. We've had increased powers given to the police and military. Yep. We have a curfew from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. And basically the government has been doing nationwide sweeps to try to stamp out the gang members and the cartels. And so Carl will take us now through the events up until now, and we'll talk about it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, what you were referring to, also through the state of emergency, the president or the government declared 22 gangs as terrorist organizations because some terrorist attacks were done by cartels and gangs, which gave the military and the police kind of full range to be able to arrest people, to be able to, I don't think, there was a few deaths. There was not that many deaths. They mostly arrested people. Gave them, they were allowed to search houses without warrants. So in the Guayaquil area, we've seen some footage of, the military or the police actually looking in homes for some of the gang members. I have some good statistics. So first of all, I'd like to say that according to what some of the things I've seen, 95% of Ecuadorians are fully on board and in agreement with what the government's been doing. People have been bringing lunches and food and beverages to military men. There was military in some of the major cities, basically with tanks, full armed military guys, and they've arrested quite a few people. So I actually have quite a bit of stats. As I'm reading them, we'll also put them on the screen. But there was in total, so this is between the 9th of January, the day where the attacks happened, and the 17th, which is today. There was a total of 20,849 operations. So all of the things they've done. They've arrested 1,975 people as of today. So almost 2,000 people were arrested. There's been 5 deaths, 5 terrorists that were...
still, even up till now.
Killed.
Okay, because the 5... Okay, interesting, yeah.
Yeah. There were some delinquents, criminals escaped the prison. I'm not sure exactly how many, but it says here that they were able to capture 32 of them. There were some police officers, I guess, that were hostage. 11 of them were liberated. I'm not sure exactly what that was referring to. And 2 policemen have died so far. That's what they're saying here. Then we've got 728 firearms that were confiscated, 736 knives, machetes, all of that stuff. They say 41, magazines for probably rifles, etc. 15 boats were confiscated as well that were, of course, related to the cartels. This is kind of a funny one to me. It says that they found in total $5,698. They've arrested like 2,000 men, and there's only, $5,000. So, I don't know exactly.
Did you see some of the? I've seen some of the videos of the police and military arresting the gangbangers. They're like the juvenile delinquents.
Oh, yeah,
they're like
sure.
teenage kids, skinny kids, and they're having fun with them too. Like
some of the stuff
depends on your definition of fun.
Right. I wouldn't be having fun if I were them.
No.
But
and we can jump into that after. There's some good. We could even show some of that.
We should, because it's funny.
But it's not. My point is that it's not surprising that they didn't have a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I was kind of the assumption, if a military guy finds a couple of grand, like they might just pocket it.
Of course.
Not declare it or something.
I see. Sure.
I don't know.
That
To
was
me,
my assumption as well.
It's just such a small amount for 2,000 people being arrested. They had a couple dollars each, let's say. So 521 explosives, 436 vehicles, cars, 21,198 bullets. So that's, quite a few bullets there.
It's okay.
251 motorcycles, 8,073 gallons of gasoline, 458 cell phones, 6,002 kilograms of drugs. So that's quite a bit of drugs.
6,000 keys, yeah.
6,000 kgs, kilograms.
Yeah, kilos, yeah.
Kilos, right. And, there was 12. I Atentados. So
Scored a goal.
looks
You
like
guys
there were
win?
12 sort of attacks on police police
Can you
stations.
take this mocha?
13 attacks on public and private
Yeah.
infrastructures. And then there was also, so the military was able to, what you didn't mention, there were prison riots. Some of the inmates were able to take over some of the jails. And at the same time, they took hostage some of the prison guards. So all of those were liberated. There was 201 prison guards in total that were liberated. All the prisons have been taken back by the government through the military. So some of the things Brandon was mentioning, there's a lot of stuff that's been posted on social media, including not only military and police, but also like normal citizens, beating up some of the delinquents and criminals. The population feels very hopeful about what's happening. It looks like the majority of Ecuadorians are not only in favor of what the government is doing, but also are feeling really more powerful, right? Because people are a little bit despaired. The gangs are running this, people are scared in certain areas and stuff, and now that the military is basically full force taking over, the Ecuadorian people feel like the government's on their side, the military's on their side, they've got power. So there's been quite a few videos posted on social media of some of the criminals being arrested, and the military men would have him sing some songs, would have him sing the national anthem, for example, would have them walk down like ducks, or there's a gang, they're the tiguerones, which are like little tigers. They were asking them to like growl like tigers, like they're just making fun of them.
Those ones are funny.
Humiliating them. It's pretty funny. In the jail, actually.
Well, they were also beating them with sticks,
beating
and
them
they
with
were
sticks.
making them do all. I mean,
They had them like, because they would make graffitis somewhere in Guayaquil with their name of their gang, right? So they would have them like in their underwear and like basically whacking them with sticks, having them paint over the graffitis and like go faster, and not over the top, but like just really like teaching them a lesson, humiliating them. I haven't seen anything like too bad where they like beat them up really badly, but yeah, people, the Ecuadorian people, the military, the police, they're kind of like taking their revenge a little bit on on some of the criminals. So
Yeah. No, I think what you said about people feeling empowered, is
right,
important because, I think that was I think that's really kind of how we got into this situation, was we had a government that really wasn't taking the problem on in a significant way.
Right.
And so people felt like, well, what can they do? Because someone, maybe they're under threat, or they got robbed, or they could be robbed, or they know who the criminals are in the community or in the neighborhood or whatever it is. But the police weren't going to have the proper response necessarily, and then the people who were committing the crimes weren't necessarily going to have the proper punishment. Right. And so people kind of feel like, well, what do you do in that situation? Mm-hmm. The self-defense laws in Ecuador are not super strong, so it's not like you could just kind of arm yourself and fire if you have an issue. So people kind of felt like, in between a rock and a hard place kind of. And then once Noboa came in, he made it very clear, both during his campaign and then once he took office, that this was going to be kind of a Bukele-style governance, where he's going in full throttle against the organized crime. People then felt, now we can kind of defend ourselves, and so that people feeling empowered that way, I think, is an important part of the story. The approval rating that you mentioned, I think, is an important part of the story as well. Yep. Also, all of Noboa's political opponents have lined up against him, which is interesting too.
He's lined up with him.
I said against. Sorry, has lined up with him.
Right.
Thank you. And then we've had some interesting statistics come out since this, which I of course don't have in front of me, but the crime has decreased in the country dramatically over the last 6 days. So I think something like 70%. Crime is down something like 70%.
And the Minister of Defense came out and gave a speech about crime being dramatically lowered in the last week or so.
And of course, it does make sense. The military's out on the streets, but also there's a curfew, and a lot of crime is committed through the night, and now you can't be out.
And just to be clear, that's for 60 days. Yes. So we're like probably 10 days or something into those 60 days. So we've got another 50 days of this state of whatever, and the curfew at night.
Right.
And then we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah.
So it's an evolving situation, obviously. We don't have any, crystal ball, like you said, to know how this will all play out. From my perspective, which is, my opinion, which is all we can give, the response has been very encouraging.
Yep.
The messaging has been very encouraging. Ecuadorians, I've noticed over the years, are very sharp when it comes to seeing through BS, right? Ecuadorians really have a capacity to know when someone's BSing them and to see through that. And the opinion that I've gotten back universally is that no, this is for real, what's taking place. And people are very happy about that.
Yeah.
People, felt like Lasso was nothing but lip service and zero action. And then Noboa's come in with a similar message to Lasso, but actually fully backing it up through action. So
Which is somewhat, whether you agree or disagree with his political, philosophy, it's somewhat refreshing to see a politician campaign on something, become elected, and then do like literally what he's saying, what he campaigned on, at least in this particular aspect. I mean, that's refreshing. You don't see that. You don't see that very often in lots of places around the world, let alone Ecuador.
But Obama closed Guantanamo and got rid of GMOs, didn't he?
Is that right?
Isn't that what he did?
Yeah, I'm sure.
No?
Yeah,
No?
probably. Yeah. Let's ask the viewers. Is that what Obama did, guys? Carl.
So that's kind of the update.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning. Like this is just the beginning, right? There's still 50 more days or whatever. It's not like the cartels are done and the government's completely taken over, but they're definitely chipping at it, and every single day. So these statistics come from the Twitter page or the X page of the Ejército Ecuatoriano, and they're every day.
The military.
The military, yeah. The Ecuadorian military, as well as some government. There are other pages that post the same, but they're giving updates every day. There's lots of pictures every time they catch. All the statistics I gave you. They show all the weapons that they found. They show all the drugs. They show everything. There's plenty of pictures we can show you guys. And we could put a link to that maybe on our page if people want to follow the Ecuadorian military and their updates.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't even really know what else to say about that. That's kind of the update. I know you mentioned the prisons, that we've seen all that footage as well. So they took all the beds out and they stopped feeding them, I think, at one point. And the only other time I've seen pictures like this is in El Salvador,
Right.
where you've got
that was directly from Bukele.
Directly from Bukele, yeah. And so you've got, the pictures of the prisoners on the ground, sort of like sardines, one against the other, heads down in their underwear, handcuffed or not. And they've got complete control of the prisons, which, again, is a very big difference, right? Like, I've been here for 10.5 years. The prisons were always kind of run by the inmates in Ecuador. Like, that was just kind of a known thing. Like, the guards' job was to keep them inside, basically, right? And then beyond that, the prisoners kind of ran the show. We've had some wild reports over the years of stuff going on in prisons. I mean, at one point, they had a fish pond in prisons where they were growing fish. We've had various situations where higher ups from various criminal organizations were like leaving on Friday and coming back on Monday, like routinely. There's all kinds of stuff. I mean, this is Latin America, this is Ecuador. Like, we've had all kinds of stuff like that. I actually know people personally who were in the prison, in the jail in Loja, and I mean, it's very funny the way stuff works there. Like, they would ask, I used to bring them like sacks of onions and yeah. One time, this was my wife's uncle had he's kind of he's kind of probably one of these guys actually, but he seems like he's kind of a little bit of a criminal, I think.
He's from the coast.
He's from the coast. He's from from Aranillas, but he ended up in this jail in Loja, and he had a cell phone. So we'd be talking, you could call and you could talk to him. He had access to the internet, and then he'd ask, we'd bring him like a sack of potatoes or like a sack of onions, and you'd give it to the guard, and then the guard would make sure he got it. But it's a very different, this is not the U.S. Like, this is a different place.
I mean, I've had a few viewers comment that, on our channel, on the last video, we talked a little bit about the prison stuff, and it was people that said that, hey, I work in a prison in the U.S. or I've been a prison guard for 30 years. We've had 2 or 3 people chime in that say that it's kind of like that in the States. Maybe not to the same extent, but the guards aren't armed inside the prison either. They have, I think, tasers and occasionally, but mostly just batons, and then
pepper spray.
And then the guns are on the outside, and they said that the inmates kind of run the prison. Maybe not to the same extent, to the same extreme that it does in Ecuador, but they kind of said the inmates kind of run the inside. The guards are just kind of there to keep it at some level of cool. But I mean, according to them, I don't know if they're really prison people. I mean, they say they are, so I'm just sharing what they said. But it's interesting. It's not hard to draw that conclusion if that's that's how prisons are anywhere in the world. And maybe Ecuador, it's just almost like a caricature of that, but it's real.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of solutions, right? Because you hear when someone goes in prison, some of these guys also, just on a side note, like you said, they're kids. Like, some of them look like they're 17, 18. They're really young.
No, you really feel bad. Like, kids got caught up in stuff they shouldn't have.
Yeah, no, it's sad.
Clearly, they're from poor families, right? They probably don't have a lot of opportunities. You assume, you see that most of them are real skinny, right? They probably don't eat much. And then, what I'm told is like, no, but seriously. And
now we're gonna have a video come out saying that we're making fun of starving people.
I know.
Please
Good
don't.
job, Carl.
No, actually, because I have compassion on them. This is just like what you're saying. What I'm being told is like some of the higher ups in the gangs, they go to these kids. They're like, hey, clearly they don't have opportunities. They're like, we'll give you a cell phone, we'll give you a gun, we'll give you a motorcycle if you work for us. So all of a sudden they're like, whoa, like I have opportunities. They're giving me this stuff that they don't have access to, and they get probably surrounded by bad people. They get into drugs and stuff, and they end up doing bad things. But
that's gang life anywhere in the world.
Anywhere, yeah.
Yep.
But what's the solution? What I was gonna say is like, is there a way to rehabilitate them in prison to where they come out better, or are they really gonna come out worse because of the environment they're in?
Yeah. I mean, I believe people deserve second chances and third chances and fourth chances. But to rehabilitate from that life, and I've got, I have a younger brother that was in that life in Chicago, and at a really young age, 13, 12, 14, and you have to want to rehabilitate from that life. Prison's not going to force it on you. Nothing's going to force you to change. You have to want a different life.
Sure.
And that's hard, right? That takes it's not easy. It's not even possible in some cases. I would imagine that people aren't strong enough mentally to do that. My brother was able to remove himself from that situation, and he did time. He went to rehab program. He's done all kinds of stuff, but until he wanted to change, it didn't matter, right? And now he's out in California, and he's a successful business owner, and he's doing when he's got a family, and he's because he wanted to, not because something forced him to. So I don't know. I know I've seen tons of prison stories, and there are guys that say, hey, I learn a lot in prison, and but it's the guys that say prison reformed me. If you listen to their stories, at least the stories I've listened to, it's often they've changed, because they wanted to in prison. They could have stayed in prison and done the same time and come out a worse version of themselves. The guys that came out better versions or different versions, they did that because they made choices in prison to become a different person. And,
Two things we did not talk about that we should probably give a quick update on. So Ecuador did increase the value-added tax. I believe that actually.
It was voted on yet?
Okay, that's what I was about to ask.
Yeah, I wasn't saying.
So I was going to ask if that was a like a presidential decree or if he's just proposing that. So it sounds like he's just proposing it, to your knowledge.
That's my understanding, but I think it's kind of known that it's going to happen or whatever. Like they've already established that they're in favor of it,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's not yet in
Technically official.
Okay, so we'll see, because other presidents have tried to increase it, and that has been very unpopular in the National Assembly normally, and so we'll see then if that actually happens. But there's a 3%, there's a proposed 3% increase in the VAT from 12 to 15%. I don't know if that's even, if he's proposing that temporarily or permanently, but temporarily.
That's what it said. 15% temporarily because of the situation, right, that we're facing. in
Right,
Ecuador.
to fund these operations.
To fund the military and stuff, yeah.
Which I am anti-tax always at all times, but I mean I might be on board for for this one. But
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they increase it temporarily and then it becomes,
they keep it.
it becomes permanent. But
Yeah, I mean we did have temporary increases I think twice in my time here that actually did go away.
Okay,
Like we had a one-time tax when the earthquake happened. I think that was in 2016, I want to say. Or is it when we had that big earthquake in Puerto Viejo and up there, where they had a one-time like wealth tax basically, which was really rough for some people because the way they calculate wealth here is not necessarily accurate. So like you might own a few properties and it looks like, you're on the tax rolls you're very wealthy, but you may have no cash at all. And so people were having to come up with like $20,000 or something to pay from where, so I know we had that, but that was just a one-time thing. And I think, don't quote me on this, look this up, but I think we had a one-time increase in the VAT as well that went away. I'm almost positive, but I don't specifically recall the parameters on that. So we'll see.
Hey guys, I don't know if you could hear in the background. There's some soccer noise. The local Vilcabamba Coliseum is just down the what is that? The hill? The mountain? What would you call that?
Yep.
So the local Independiente del Valle team from Vilcabamba played. We helped sponsor the team here at Abundant Living. Come here, Quinn. Quinn had a game today. He hurt his wrist. Come here real quick.
Just say hi.
Just come say hi. Come on, he's a little shy. He's shy, but you guys had a game. What was the score?
2-1.
2-1. Did you guys win?
Yes.
Did you do your best?
Yes.
You try your hardest?
Yes.
Did you score any goals?
Yes.
How many?
1.
All right.
Nice.
Good job. All right.
Cool.
All right. So if you heard some noise, that was that going on. It's still going on down there, guys. But I don't know
All
how
right.
to transition.
No, that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Again, put a like on the video if you enjoy this content. If you'd like to interact with us or ask any questions, please put them in the comments. We do our best to get to as many of those comments as we can. We're pretty active with, I feel ridiculous saying our community. That just sounds ridiculous. But with the folks that comment on our YouTube channel, we do try to engage and answer questions. We've done a few of them in the past. We'll do another episode soon where we talk about some of the questions on the pod itself. So continue to put those there. We really appreciate the interaction. And
We hope to see you here one day.
So until then,
we'll see you next time.
ciao, guys.
If you're interested in real estate properties, all of our property videos will now be uploaded on a different channel. Please click the link in the description down below.